בינות שירביצני על מי מנוחות ינעלני נפשי ישובר ינחני במעגלי צדק ינחני במעגלי צדק למען שמו גם כי אלה בגיא צל מוות לא יירא רע כי אתה עמדי שבטך ומשענתך שבטך ומשענתך המה ינחמוני תערוך לפני שולחן תערוך לפני שולחן תערוך לפני שולחן נגד צורריי תשענת בשמן ראשי תשענת בשמן ראשי תשענת בשמן ראשי כוסי רוויה אך טוב החסד ירדפוני כל ימי חיי ושבתי בבית השם ושבתי בבית השם ליורך ימים אך טוב החסד ירדפוני כל ימי חיי ושבתי בבית השם ליורך ימים די 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 לאורך ימים
אלוהים נתן לך במתנה דבר גדול, דבר נפלא. אלוהים נתן לך במתנה את החיים על פני האדמה. נתן לך את הלילה והיום אהבה, תקווה וחלום, קיץ, חורף, סתיו, אביב, נשמה טובה להביט סביב. נתן לך שדות ירוקים, פרחים ועצים מלבלבים, נהרות, נחלים וימים, שמיים, ירח, כוכבים. אלוהים נתן לך במתנה דבר גדול, דבר נפלא. אלוהים נתן לך במתנה את החיים על פני האדמה. נתן לך חגים ושבתות, את ישראל ארץ האבות, ידיים וראש להגשים חלומות. נתן לך את כל הנפלאות, נתן לך דברים כל כך יפים, להביא לעולם ילדים, להאזין לשירים, לראות צבעים. ומה רבו מעשיך אלוהים. אלוהים נתן לך במתנה דבר גדול, דבר נפלא. אלוהים נתן לך במתנה את החיים על פני האדמה. אלוהים נתן לך במתנה דבר גדול, דבר נפלא. אלוהים נתן לך במתנה את החיים על פני האדמה. אלוהים תן לי רק עוד מתנה, מתנה קטנה אך נפלאה. אלוהים תן לי רק עוד מתנה, את השלום על פני האדמה.
ואתה נשנה את העולם. אני ואתה אז יבואו כבר כולם. אמרו את זה קודם לפניי, לא משנה. אני ואתה נשנה את העולם. אני ואתה ננסה מההתחלה, יהיה לנו רע, אין דבר, זה לא נורא. אמרו את זה קודם לפניי, זה לא משנה. אני ואתה נשנה את העולם. שיר למעלות, אשא עיניי אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מעם השם, עושה שמיים וארץ, אל ייתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך, הנה לא ינום ולא ישן שומר ישראל, השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך. יומם השמש לא יככה וירח בלילה, השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך, השם ישמור צאתך ובואך מעתה ועד עולם. שיר למעלות, אשא עיניי אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מעם השם, עושה שמיים וארץ, אל ייתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך, הנה לא ינום ולא ישן.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Shabbat Shalom. This is Hakham Melech Rahmiel of the World Alliance of Qara'im and the Karaite Insights, and this is our weekly Torah study. Once again, we are broadcasting to you live from the Golan Heights. Excuse me, from the Golan Heights, right here in the land of Israel, and it has certainly been an interesting week. I'll tell you. I'll tell you what, I could say it's a funny story now because nothing happened. But I guess it was, well, it all happened so fast. It wasn't funny or not funny or scary or not scary at the time. But, we have gotten a lot of alerts here in the north. And the way it usually works is that when missiles that detected from, so most of the missiles have been from, or most of the alerts have been from Iran. Some have been from Lebanon, from Hezbollah, but the vast majority have been from Iran. And the way it works here is when we get an alert, or when they detect that missiles are coming from Iran, so they give us a general alert first, and it's kind of an alert that covers a wide area. So let's say the north of the country or the center of the country or the south of the country, because they haven't yet determined where the missiles are going to land. So we get that alert, and then that alert basically tells us that there might be local sirens going off in your area in about the next, it's usually the next few minutes, but it's usually about 10 to 15 minutes later. If they've detected that missiles are going to land in the more specific area, or let's put it this way, when they've detected more specifically where the missiles are going to land, then they'll operate the air raid sirens in those particular areas. So if I live in the Golan Heights, if I live in the city of Katsrin in the Golan Heights, if they detect that there's possible, oh, here we go, I gotta go. You guys okay?
How does this work? Oh, I see something. All right. Hello. Alrighty. Let's see how this works. Okay. I think I'm here. So I came in on my phone right now, and I'm in the protected area inside the house. Hopefully, it's all going to be over in a couple of minutes and I can get back to continuing the study. But I can continue from where I am. I hope you guys hear me. Let me just make sure. Yeah, you should be able to hear me. So that's the way it usually works. So we got a an alert that I'll just read you the alert here. So it says hostile aircraft at southern Golan area, Katsurin. And that usually doesn't mean it's a missile. That usually means it's a drone coming from Lebanon. And I did hear fighter planes overhead. So they're probably heading towards Lebanon at this moment, I'm guessing. And that's the way it is. So I just waited it out here in the protected area. And then when they give the all clear, I usually wait for about 10 minutes. And then I can leave. So I guess I'll sit down for a second and try to finish what I was saying on the stage earlier. So yeah, so that is life here. You got a firsthand view of what life is like here in Israel at the moment. The alerts can come at any time. Our lovely friends in Iran and in Lebanon, of course, love to send us missiles and drones in the middle of the night to wake up the Jews. I don't know if you can hear the fighter planes overhead. I don't know if it's making it onto the microphone, but they're in the background. And so we can get alerts at 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning. You could be in the shower. You could be on the sitting on the toilet. You know, Hezbollah and Iran, they don't really clear it with us before they decide to send over missiles or drones. They just do it, and they do it specifically at times when it's going to be most inconvenient to us here in Israel. Okay, good. I'm glad you can hear me. Thank you, Grace, for letting me know. And so that's the situation. So I'll continue here for another couple of minutes, and then I'll go back to the main broadcasting studio. So yeah, that's the situation we're living in right here. Thank God there hasn't been anything major in this area. I think I could do this. No, I'll put it back the way it was. There hasn't been anything major in this area, but I will tell you a story about what happened to me this week. So I decided to go out for a hike, and I went to a specific place. We're not actually supposed to speak about where specific things fell, so I'm not going to mention the place. But I went out to a specific place to do a hike, a beautiful Nachal, which in English would be translated into a stream or a wadi, and uh, my thinking was that if I'm out in the middle of the wilderness, then nothing's going to happen there. But actually, after I tell you the story, and thank God I'm fine, nothing happened that did any damage to me in any way, shape, or form. But it was a bit scary, as you'll see in a second. But actually, now I realize that that's probably not the best idea, because Israel, if they detect that something is going to land in an unpopulated area, they will not shoot it down. They don't want to waste the interceptors. And if they determine that something is going to land in a populated area, they will shoot it down. So I'm hiking out in this place in this beautiful by this beautiful stream in a beautiful ravine here in the Golan Heights, and just hiking, taking pictures of the wildflowers and just enjoying myself. And all of a sudden, the whole thing happened in, I would say, less than 3 seconds. It might have even been less than that. I'm going to give it about 3 seconds at the most. All of a sudden, I hear this like out of nowhere, and then hear this big explosion, and I look over and I see this fireball about, I'm guessing, about 1,000 feet away from me, something like that. It was on the other side of the ravine. It was on the other side of the wadi, and I see this huge fireball. And the only way I can explain the size of the fireball is it looked kind of like a the way you would see a car explosion on in a movie or on television. That's about how large the fireball was. And then it went out very, very quickly. And then there was a plume of smoke afterwards, and I was like, "Whoa!" that if that had been in a slightly different position, that place, that would have been the end of me. And it all happened so fast. I didn't have time to be scared. I didn't really have time to think about it. Certainly didn't have time to do anything about it. It was all over really before it started. But yeah, that was my experience this past week. So I'm going to be, unfortunately, because this is what I love to do, especially during the war, it's very important for me to get out into nature. In general, it is, but I'm probably going to have to cut back. Although I might just go out and do it again, because honestly, what are the chances, you know? But we'll see. So that's what happened to me this week. And yeah, the war goes on. Where it's going to end, I don't know. So I don't think it's going to end the way the United States and Israel think it's going to end. I think it could actually expand into a much wider war. I think it could actually herald in what people might like to call World War III or Armageddon or the end of days. I don't know. I'm reluctant to say such a thing because so many people in the past have said it and they've been wrong. And it has always caused false messiahs to arise, such as Jesus, Shabtai Tzvi, Bar Kochba, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Menachem Mendel Schneerson. So I'm very reluctant to say that this is the end of days kind of stuff, but I'm telling you, I don't know, it's looking pretty iffy. But I will say one thing which is 100% clear. So Trump, who I love, by the way, and Bibi, who I barely tolerate, but he's there. Their idea for this war was very clear. It was, we're gonna they this all came in the wake of the Iranians, taking to the streets, thousands and thousands of them, to protest the government. And so the idea of the United States and Israel was, we're going to strike at this time with the belief and with the hope that this is now going to galvanize the people in Iran to overthrow the government of the Ayatollahs. And the specific moment that was chosen to start the war was when I guess it was the United States and or Israel detected, I think it was the United States intelligence that detected that the Ayatollah Khomeini, who is now a pile of dust, was had surfaced above ground, or had surfaced to a place where his location was detected. And so that's when Israel decided to strike, to decapitate the head of the snake, so to speak, with the hope and with the expectation that this is now going to galvanize the Iranian people to rise up and overthrow their government. Well, that didn't happen, right? It didn't happen, and it's probably not going to happen. The new Ayatollahs, same as the new Ayatollah, same as the old Ayatollah, is seems to be pretty much in control. The Ayatollahs and the mullahs and the Islamic Revolutionary Guard, they seem to be still pretty much in control, and there doesn't seem to be any signs of uprising in the streets. So I think it was quite naive for Israel and the United States to expect they're just going to go in there, knock out the Ayatollah, drop a couple of bombs. The people of Iran are going to rise up, overthrow the government, and that's going to be the end of it. In fact, when you start bombing people, then they become more loyal to their government. As unpopular as that government might have been previously, it becomes more popular. It becomes more people become more loyal to it when their homeland gets bombed. So I think this was naive, and it certainly hasn't happened so far. Right, the war has been going on for about 2 weeks, and there certainly has been no resolution there. And it looks like there's no resolution anytime soon. This is causing some chaos back, a lot of chaos back in the United States of America. Many Americans are against the war. They're blaming the Jews, and maybe rightfully so, for this war. And Trump's, who has an upcoming midterm election, his popularity is suffering. It's being perceived in the United States that the United States is going to war not for its own interests, but for the interests of Israel. And this could very well lead to, well, I did a video not too long ago saying that the Jews have 10 years left in the United States of America. And I might have to revise that to 2 years or even less. I think somebody said today, somebody mentioned today that this could lead to pogroms in the United States against the Jews. And whereas if anyone had said there would be pogroms against the Jews in the United States maybe not 5, but 10 years ago, everyone would have thought they were crazy. But now I could definitely see that happening. In fact, I think it's likely that it will happen. And what the heck is this button? Oh, I see it's doing that. Got it. Anywho, so okay, so we just got an alert. The event has ended. The incident has ended in northern Golan, southern Golan, upper Galilee, etc. You can leave your protected areas. So I'm going to go back to the main studio. Just bear with me for a second. Actually, let me just put the keys back here. Just give me 1 second, please. One second. Do it from the other side. Right here. Just a second, please. Okay. That's that. That's that. Walk out back here. So to make a long story short, it certainly is not going to be and has not been a cakewalk. Certainly has not been a walk in the park. Okay, so now I'm back. Okay, so I can disconnect from here. No, I don't want to end the stream. Go off. Let's see what happened there. 1 second. Okay, so now I'm back on this one. Now I can somehow get rid of this one. Remove. And we should be back in business. Okay, remove this. Okay. Okay. So we are back. Yeah, so that's the situation. So I don't think it's going to be so easy at all. And I think really what could happen is this could expand into a much greater war where China and North Korea and Russia could get involved
on the Iranian side, and perhaps NATO and India and other allies of the United States could get involved on the American side, and you could have some end of days prophecies happening here. And talking about end of days prophecies, we're going to be studying today the book of Zechariah, and we'll get to that in a couple of minutes. So that's what I got. It's shaping up to be some interesting times. I just revamped my book, The Torah and the Marketplace of Ideas. So I will try to, when it's ready in the next couple of days, publish a link for that. And we continue to do our weekly World Alliance of Qara'im meetings here in the Golan Heights in Katzrin. So in terms of getting the word out about Karaism, I'm trying to do my part as much as I can to get the word out. I think it's essential this time to get the word out. And we'll see where things go. So let me put music on for just a couple of minutes. And we will then dive into the book of Zechariah, the book of Zechariah. And we'll take it from there. Okay, so see you guys back here in just a couple of minutes. I'm glad you guys were able to get a kind of bird's eye view of what's going on here. Okay, I'm going to put on music for a couple seconds, and we'll be right back. Just give me a second here.
تشاشي عمي والفرق يدور أفريد نسوايتي مرة في الدنيا وأخذك جيتك ما تقمي سوالونك أريد موافينو من اللازم فيمو أريد موافينو من اللازم فيمو أرد الناس تشاشي عمي والفرق يدور أفريد نسوايتي مرة في الدنيا وأخذك جيتك ما تقمس وهرونك أريد موافينو للا سنقيمو حرب حرن بويا فان هيا زمان فكري وعدوا في ذقر الناس ونادي فاسري حرب حرن بويا فان هيا زمان فكري وعدوا في ذقر الناس ونادي فاسري وسكت راسك وخرس بهدي تشري أمان نسيباشنا ميت صفيت تبري وسكت راسك وخرس بهدي تشري أمان نسيباشنا ميت صفيت تبري عريقة موافنون للا زال في مراد عريقة موافنون للا زال في مراد
Okay, we're back, and we're going to dig into the book of Zechariah, chapter 3. So let's do that. Okay, so let me share the screen. Okay, so there we go. We're in Zechariah chapter 3. We're going to start in chapter 3. And let's just get a little bit of an overview. So instead of using Rabbi Wikipedia, I'm going to use Rabbi AI today, which is maybe about as reliable as Rabbi Wikipedia. But for stuff like this, it should be fine. So we're going to be dealing with a bunch of prophecies now regarding Joshua the high priest. So we should get an idea of who is Joshua the high priest. Let's see if I can make this a little bit larger. Okay, Joshua the high priest. Oops. Let me just make sure this is showing up on your guys' screen. And it is. So let's get a little bit of an overview of who this Joshua the high priest is. Okay. So he was the first priest of the Jews after the return from the Babylon captivity. He served roughly between 515 and 490 BCE during the Second Temple period. So this is right around the time where the Jews are rebuilding the Second Temple. So remember, they were exiled by the Babylonians in 586 BCE. The exile lasted, give or take, 70 years. So let's go with 70 years. So 586 minus 70 is 516 BCE. And so this is right around the time when the Jews, or I shouldn't say the Jews, since not all of them did so, but some Jews started returning from Babylon, which was now Persia, under the edict of Koresh, of Cyrus the Great of Persia. Very, very interesting history, that period in Persia. Fascinating, but we won't go into it right now. So alongside Governor Zerubbabel, who's considered kind of the head of the first wave of returnees from Persia, Joshua played a key role in rebuilding the altar of God in the Second Temple. As the son of Yehozadak and the descendant of Zadok, so Zadok was the high priest under David. It's also where the word the Sadducees, or the name the Sadducees, come from. So in Hebrew, the Sadducees, who were the enemies of the Pharisees. In Hebrew, Sadducees is Tzadukim, which is believed to come from the word Zadok, the high priest of under David. And Pharisees is Pirushim, which is believed, well, the most common explanation is because they separated themselves either from the common people or from ritual impurity. They didn't need to. At any rate, he reestablished the Aaronic priesthood. His efforts were supported by the prophets Haggai and Zechariah. So as depicted in Zechariah 3:6, chapter 3, verse 6, and we're going to start learning chapter 3 now. We should stop doing this ask about thing. So this way, he symbolizes the restoration of Israel. Key elements include the vision of the filthy garments, which we'll discuss, signifying the cleansing of iniquity, and his role as a messianic type, foreshadowing a unified priestly and kingly role. More information. Yeah, here we go. So this is where it appears in the Tanakh. So Joshua the high priest is primarily mentioned in 4 books of the Old Testament that focus on the return of the Jewish exiles from Babylon. In Zechariah, he's a central figure in the prophet's visions. In Zechariah chapter 3, he's seen standing before the angel of the Lord, the angel of Yahweh, in filthy garments, while being accused by the Satan. Satan is not a proper name in Tanakh. Before God cleanses him and gives him new robes. In Zechariah 6, he's symbolically crowned excuse me, as a foreshadowing of the Messiah. In Haggai, which we will get to eventually, he's frequently mentioned alongside the governor Zerubbabel. Haggai addresses them together to encourage the rebuilding of the Second Temple. And that's in Haggai 1 and 2. And in Ezra, appearing as Yeshua, he's listed as a leader who returned with the first wave of exiles. He's credited with leading the reconstruction of the altar and the temple foundation. And we'll look at him very briefly in Ezra. Okay, the symbolism of the filthy garments, which is what we're going to talk about. So in the visions of the prophet Zechariah, Joshua the high priest serves as a powerful sign or type, representing both the fallen state of Israel and the future restoration through the Messiah. And the symbolism of the filthy garments. In Zechariah's fourth vision, Joshua is seen standing in a heavenly courtroom before the angel of the Lord, while the Satan stands at his right hand to accuse him. Joshua is clothed in filthy garments. The Hebrew word used is tzo'im, is extremely graphic, referring to clothes stained with excrement, from the word tzo'ah, which means that which comes out of a person. And that's a euphemistic way of saying his excrement. This represents the sin and ritual defilement of the Jewish people following their exile in Babylon. And we're going to see also this phrase. a brand, meaning a firebrand, so a piece of wood or a brand plucked from the fire. The Lord rebukes Satan, calling Joshua a burning stick snatched from the fire. This symbolizes Israel as a nation that was nearly destroyed by the fire of divine judgment. The exile was mercifully rescued by God, and then divine justification. The angel commands that Joshua's filthy clothes be removed and replaced with festal robes and a clean turban. This act signifies forgiveness and the restoration of the priesthood's authority, showing that the cleansing is a gift from God rather than the result of the human effort. I'm also going to see something about Tzemach, the branch. So let's read this very briefly, and then we'll actually get into the text. The visions explicitly link Joshua to a future called the branch, Tzemach, a traditional messianic title used by other prophets like Isaiah and Jeremiah. The symbol of things to come in Zechariah 3:8, God declares that Joshua and his fellow priests are men symbolic of things to come, specifically pointing to the arrival of my servant, the branch. The crowning in Zechariah 6, which we won't get to today. In a later scene, Zechariah is told to make a crown of silver and gold and place it on Joshua's head. This was highly unusual because under Mosaic law, the roles of the priest and king were strictly separate. And so Joshua becomes a priest king. The symbolic crowning predicts a future ruler, the Messiah, who will sit and rule on his throne and also be a priest on his throne. And this, so typologically, the link is strengthened by their names. So Joshua or Yeshua and Jesus, and they're not talking about, well, Christians will make the connection, but it's not what it's speaking about in the Old Testament. Both mean Yeshua, salvation, basically. Okay. All right, so we get the idea. We're going to dig in now to Zechariah chapter 3, verse 1 in the Hebrew. Oops, this is the English here. Let's take a look at the Hebrew. Rabbi AI, yes, exactly. Okay, so what do we got here? So we're in Zechariah chapter 3, verse 1. Let's go to the Hebrew. We've got our Robert Alter nearby with some other insights. And we're going to dig in. So we're in verse 1. Wayareni. So this is now Zechariah speaking. Wayareni et Yehoshua HaKohen HaGadol Omed Lifnei Malach Yahweh. So he showed me Joshua, the high priest, standing before the angel, literally the messenger of Yahweh, which means the angel. Again, we say angel. The English word angel comes from the Greek word angelos, which means a messenger. That's all an angel is, a messenger of Yahweh. And the Satan. So now, of course, Christians and Americans and anyone coming from the West likes to translate this as Satan, but there's no such concept of a Satan in the Old Testament. A Satan just means the inciter, or a lot of times we'll translate the Satan as the adversary. Satan just means an enemy, essentially. So there's some other angel who is taking this role. It's not an angel named Satan. Some other angel who's playing the role of the adversary, of the inciter. We see this also in at the beginning of the book of Job. Okay. So, but actually before that, right, I wanted to go very briefly to just get a little bit of background to the book of Ezra to see who this Joshua is in the text. So let me just get those verses there. So it's in Ezra. Let's go to 2:2, 3:2. And we'll just do it in the English just to save a little bit of time. So Ezra chapter 2. Right? So now these are the people of the province who came up from the captivity of the exiles, whom Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, had taken captive to Babylon. They returned to Jerusalem and Judah, each to their own town, in company with Zerubbabel, Joshua. Okay, so we know who Zerubbabel is. He was really the leader of the first group of returnees. Nehemiah, we know who that is. Whole book about him. And so on and so forth. This is Mordechai, but not our Mordechai from the book of Esther. It was a rather common name back then, based on the Babylonian king Marduk. Mordechai means of Marduk. And then we have a list. If we go to, let's say Babylonian king, I'm sorry, I meant Babylonian god, lowercase g. And then if we go to chapter 3, so from chapter 3, verse 2. So in the 7th month, so let's just read through this, the rebuilding of the altar and the rebuilding of the temple. I'm going to read through it in English, just so we can get an idea. So in the 7th month came, and the Israelites settled in their towns, and the people assembled together as one in Jerusalem. 7th month is, of course, the month in which we have the holidays of Yom Teruah, Yom Kippurim, and Sukkot. Then Joshua, son of Yehozadak, and his fellow priests, and Zerubbabel, son of Shealtiel, and his associates began to build the altar of the God of Israel to sacrifice burnt offerings upon it. Can we get a year here? Let's see. A second. Well, we're going to have to save this for when we actually study the book of Ezra, which we'll get to. So in the first year of the king of Cyrus of Persia, so I don't know. I'm not sure exactly what it is. We don't get a year really for the starting of the rebuilding of the temple. And actually, I think the date is disputed. Okay, at any rate, then Joshua, the son of Yehozadak, and his fellow priests, and Zerubbabel, son of Shealtiel, and his associates began to build the altar of the God of Israel to sacrifice burnt offerings on it, in accordance with what is written in the law of Moses, the man of God. Despite their fear of the peoples around them, they built the altar on its foundation and sacrificed burnt offerings on it to Yahweh, both the morning and evening sacrifices. Then, in accordance with what is written, they celebrated the festival of tabernacles with the required number of burnt offerings prescribed for each day. After that, they presented the burnt offerings, the new moon sacrifices, and the sacrifices for all those appointed sacred festivals of Yahweh, as well as those brought free will offerings to the Lord. So 1 second here. This is one thing in Hebrew. Excuse me for 1 second. I just want to check something for myself. יום ביום במספר כמצוות ביומו, ואחרי כן הולד תמיד בחודשים לחודש. Rebuilding the temple. So on the first day of the 7th month, they began to offer burnt offerings to Yahweh though the foundation of Yahweh's temple had not yet been laid. So they have an altar, but they don't have a temple. Then they gave money to the masons and carpenters, and gave food and drink and olive oil to the people of Sidon and Tyre. So they would bring cedar logs by sea from Lebanon to Jaffa, as authorized by Cyrus, king of Persia. So remember, back in the day of David and Solomon, it was days of David and Solomon. It was the king of Tyre, of Atzor, whose name was Hiram, who had actually provided wood for the building of the first temple. In the second, and that was many hundreds of years earlier, that was around 1000 BC, a little bit later than that. In the second month of the second year after their arrival at the house of God in Jerusalem, Zerubbabel, son of Shaltiel, Joshua, son of Yehotzadak, and the rest of the people, priests and the Levites and all, would return from the captivity to Jerusalem, began to the work. So here have a date, the second month of the second year after their arrival. They appointed Levites 20 years and older to supervise the building of the house of Yahweh. Joshua and his sons and brothers, and Kadmiel and his sons, descendants of Hodaviah, and the sons of Hendad and their sons and brothers, all Levites joined together in supervising those working on the house of God. When the builders laid the foundation of the temple of Yahweh, the priests in their vestments and with their trumpets, and the Levites with cymbals took their places to praise Yahweh, as prescribed by David, king of Israel. With praise and thanksgiving they sang to the Lord. He is good, his love towards Israel endures forever. And all the people gave a great shout of praise to Yahweh, as the foundation of the Lord was laid. But many of the older priests and Levites and family heads who had seen the former temple wept aloud when they saw the foundation of this temple being laid, while many others shouted for joy. No one could distinguish the sound of the shouts of joy from the sound of weeping, because the people made so much noise, and the sound was heard far away. Okay, so that's an idea of who Joshua was. Okay, so he was the high priest under the governor Zerubbabel, who was really the first. That was really the first group to return to Israel. Okay, so that gives us our context. And now we can go on. Shabbat Shalom, Christian Simon. Alrighty. So we have Zechariah is now seeing a vision of Yoshua, this high priest, under Zerubbabel, the high priest who officiated when the altar was rebuilt. So we're talking at around 515, give or take, BCE, approximately 70 years after the exile, time of Cyrus the Great. Let's see what was the time of the reign of Cyrus the Great. When did Cyrus the Great? Should we go to Rabbi with AI again? So saying here 559 BCE to 530 BCE. So this was after his reign. Okay. Any rate, so we have a Malach Yahweh, we have an angel of Yahweh, and we have the Hasatan, the adversary, the inciter. Verse 2. Why Yomer Yahweh el Hasatan? Yig'ar Yahweh becha Hasatan. Let's translate up to there. So Yahweh said to the Satan, said to this adversarial angel, God Yahweh b'cha Satan. Yahweh rebukes you, Satan. Vayigad Yahweh b'cha habocher Yerushalayim. And Yahweh rebukes the one. I'm sorry. Vayigad Yahweh b'cha habocher Yerushalayim. And Yahweh, the one who has chosen Jerusalem, right? Remember previous prophecies of Zechariah that Yahweh has now decided to show mercy on Jerusalem. What does that mean, to show mercy on Jerusalem? What it means in this context is to allow Jerusalem to be resettled, to allow the returnees from Persia to come back, to allow, as we just saw in Ezra chapter 3, the altar of sacrifice, and then the second temple to be built. So I rebuke you. So Yahweh is rebuking this Satan. So what is this Satan? What is this adversary? This adversary is obviously attempting to convince Yahweh to not have mercy on Jerusalem, to not allow the resettlement, the return of the Jews, and we can now call them Jews because they came from the from the kingdom of Judea. So they were actually Yehudim at this point. So not allow the Jews, or he's trying to convince Yahweh not to allow the Jews to return from Persia to resettle Jerusalem and the cities of Judea, to rebuild the altar and to build the second temple, right? Halo ze ud mutzal me'esh. This is a famous statement. I'll try to get a bit of commentary on it. Is this referring to Joshua? Ud mutzal me'esh. Ud is, they usually translate it as a firebrand or a brand or a burning stick. Let's see if they translate it here. Firebrand. Mutzal, saved from the fire. So this is Joshua, or maybe this is representative of all the returning exiles. It's like a stick that's caught in a fire, and you pluck it out of the fire. This is the imagery here. You pluck it out of the fire before it's completely destroyed. That's what Joshua is, or maybe by extension, that's what the returnees are. Let's get a little Robert Alter on this one. Okay. And he showed me Joshua, the high priest, standing before a messenger of Yahweh, and the adversary was standing on his right to accuse him. And the Lord said to the adversary, Yahweh rebuke you, adversary. Yahweh, who has chosen Jerusalem, rebuke you. Is not this a brand saved from the fire? Okay, and let's get a little commentary on that. So the adversary. So this is the Satan. Note the definite article, indicating someone fulfilling a role rather than a proper name, right? It's very important. That's what we mentioned it. So the Christians believe in Satan, some some angel, some fallen angel, or some enemy of God who has some kind of independence, and that's not the concept in the Tanakh at all. So what he's saying, the definite article, if we look at the Hebrew, okay, I'm going to go to that, Has-Satan. So it's not Satan, a guy named Satan, or an angel named Satan. It's Has-Satan, the adversary, or the inciting angel, Has-Satan. Okay, not to be confused with the later mythological Satan. In Job, this translation renders the term as the adversary, but accuser would also work here to pick up the link with the cognate verb at the end of this sentence, which he's talking about as lisitno. Okay, to accuse or to incite, maybe would be a better one. Okay, so we see here lisitno means to incite him. Incite who? To incite Yahweh. So this Satan, this angel who's playing the role of the inciter or the adversary, is attempting to incite Yahweh to not have mercy on the Jews and on Jerusalem. Okay, that's the story of what's going on here. So the accuser, kind of prosecuting attorney who belongs to the divine entourage, sons of God, B'nai Elohim, and Job, carries out the task of calling attention to the sundry trespass of the people, but now he's rebuked because God is ready to remove the guilt of the people. And that's what this image, or that's what this vision of Zechariah that we're going to study right now is. It's about using Joshua as a symbol of removing the guilt of the people of Israel. Okay. So verse 3, Zechariah chapter 3, verse 3. ויהושע היה לבוש בגדים צועים ועומד לפני המלאך. So in this vision, Joshua, again, who's the high priest under Zerubbabel, was dressed in excrement-stained clothes, to put it in very common terms, shit stains all over his clothes. ועומד לפני המלאך, and he was standing before the angel, this other angel, right? So get the scene here. We've got an angel who's on the side of the Jews, or maybe just a neutral messenger, but not against the Jews. And then we have the Satan, the adversary, the inciting or the accusing angel, standing to the right of Joshua. Okay, and Joshua is dressed in excrement-stained clothing. Verse 4. ויען ויאמר אל העומדים לפניו, לאמור, הסירו הבגדים הצועים מעליו. So this is now the angel. So this is the good angel, right? We've got a good angel and a bad angel. You guys know, like that those scenes that they do in the cartoons, right? You have the good angel on one shoulder, the bad angel on the other shoulder. So I guess the bad angel is on the right, so he's on the right shoulder, I guess, and maybe the good angel's on the left shoulder. So he answered, or responded, V'yomer el omdim lefanav, and he said to those standing before him, Lemor, saying, Asiru begadim atzoim me'alav, remove these shit-stained clothing from this shit-stained clothing from him. So it's a good angel saying, let the excrement-stained clothing be removed from Joshua, the Kohen Gadol. Wayomer, and he said to him, Wayomer Elau, Ra'eh, behold, or see. And he said to him, so this is, let's get the context here. This, I believe, is the good angel speaking still aloud. Behold, I have caused to pass before you, or that's a better translation, I have taken away from you your iniquity, your sin. And I've dressed you with beautiful garments. Okay? Let's get a little translation from Robert Alter and commentary on that one. And Joshua was clothed in foul garments. No, it wasn't foul, literally excrement, shit-stained garments, and was standing before the messenger. And he spoke out and said before all those standing before him, remove the foul garments from him. And he said to them, see, I have taken away your guilt from you and dressed you in fine raiment. And let's get a little commentary. Okay, foul. The Hebrew word is associated with excrement. It is not that the high priest is personally culpable, but as chief sacerdotal officiant for the people, the residue of all their heinous acts clings to him. All those standing before them, the idiom means standing in attendance. Fit garments. Fit is merely implied in Hebrew, but that must be the sense. Okay. Fine. And the word here in Hebrew is the machalatzot. I'll use my new favorite toy, the split view. And I think this only appears once. Yeah. No, it appears twice. So machalatzot designates an outer garment of special quality, an overrobe or change of clothes reserved for formal occasions. So machalatzot is distinct in pointing to attire that is both valuable and symbolically charged, marking status, joy, or cleansing. It only appears twice. Alrighty. Okay. So, verse 5. وَأَمَارْ يَسِمُ التَّنِيف tahor al rosho. And I said, this is again the good angel speaking, let a pure turban, Tanif, as we learned about it in Exodus, as one of the garments of the high priest. There was called a mitznefet, but it's the same thing. So a pure turban upon his head. And this pure turban was placed on his head. And he was dressed with clothes, meaning clean clothes is the implication, as the angel of Yahweh stood there. Do you want to go outside? Hold on. Let me slip out. Wants to go? You got it, baby. Go. Go. Okay. Okay, so that's the image. So far. That's the vision so far. So the good angel goes on. Ya'ad malach Yahweh Yehoshua lemor. So Ya'ad would be to act as a witness towards. Let's get an official translation of that. Bear witness, to testify, right, from Aid. And actually, before we go on, let's go back and get a little bit more translation and interpretation. It's always nice to get a second opinion. That's why I do this Robert Alter thing. And he said, let them put a pure diadem on his head, and they put a pure diadem on his head and dressed him in fit garments with the Lord's messenger standing by. And the Lord's messenger warned Joshua, saying, that's what we're up to right now. Okay. Okay, so verse 7. כה אמר יהוה צבאות אם בדרכי תלך ואם את משמרתי תשמור וגם אתה תדין את ביתי וגם תשמור את חצרי ונתתי לך מהלכים בין עומדים האלה. Okay, so this is what the good angel says to Joshua, who has now had the shit-stained clothes taken off of him, replaced with beautiful garments and a clean or pure turban. So says Yahweh Tzivaot, so says the Lord of hosts, Im b'darchai telech, if you walk in my ways, Wa'im et mishmarti tishmor, and if you keep my charge, and also you judge my house. I'll talk about that, what that means in a second, but let me just finish the verse here. And also keep watch over my courtyards. Then I will give you a path between all of those. In other words, I will clear for you a path between all of those standing here. Okay? So what does it mean, tadin et beiti? Judge my house. Watishmor et chatzarai, and keep guard over my courtyards. So that's clearly, obviously, the house is the reference of Beit Yahweh, the house of Yahweh. That's speaking about the temple, the second temple that was about to be rebuilt, or the temple in general, but here the context is the second temple that's about to be rebuilt. And the courtyard is the courtyard around the house, right? So the tent of meeting, so the temple is essentially the tent of meeting, the Ohel Moed is essentially replaced with a permanent house by Solomon. Okay, David requests to do such a thing, and then Solomon actually carries it out. So permanent house is built for Yahweh, for the Kavod Yahweh, which rests between, as we've said many times, the cover of the ark, the cherubim on the cover of the ark. So Yahweh has no physical form, but his spirit, shall we say, the Kavod Yahweh, the glory of Yahweh emanates from the place between the cherubim on the ark cover of the Ark of the Covenant, which is in the Holy of Holies, which is in the tent of meeting, later replaced by this house, the house of Yahweh, which sits in the courtyard of the house, which is surrounded by, well, when it was tabernacle, it was surrounded by curtains, right? By hanging curtains. So that's what it's speaking about. And the implication here is to make sure that the sacrificial services, or that's too limited, to the systematic, the technical term would be the cultic worship, but I don't like to use that because it's a loaded word in modern English, but the systematic worship of Yahweh is carried out according to its laws, and specifically making sure that no impurity, no ritual impurity, which we've studied about throughout the book of Leviticus, comes in contact with any of the elements of the temple, and also that the sacrifices are carried out. The sacrifices, and it's not just the sacrifices, the other elements of the systematic worship are carried out, and we're going to speak about some of them when we go afterwards to Leviticus chapter 24, when we continue speaking about the incense I'm sorry, the menorah and the showbread, right? That's part of the cultic. Again, when I use the word cultic, it's the technical or the academic term cultic in this context means the systematized worship of Yahweh. So this is what this means, is to make sure that all of this is carried out. This is the job of the Kohen Gadol, to make sure that all of these prescribed rituals in the Torah are carried out to a T. And we saw what happened, for instance, in Leviticus chapter 9, when Nadav and Avihu, the first two sons of Aaron, did not carry out the ritualistic worship of Yahweh correctly. They brought their own incense, which was not part of the rules, not part of the laws, and they were burnt by fire, right? Fire came out of heaven and burnt them to death. Okay, so if you do this, I will clear for you a path among all of those standing there. Here. Let's get a little commentary on this. So, translation and commentary. Thus says Yahweh of armies, if you walk in my ways and if you keep my watch, and also if you oversee my house and also guard my courts, I will let you come and go among these attendants. Okay. So, if you oversee my house and also guard my courts, this injunction to see the maintenance of the temple and anticipates its rebuilding, which at this moment has just begun. I will let you come and go among these attendants. This is an extraordinary promise because the attendants are divine beings. Okay, let's go on. So verse 8, so in Zechariah chapter 3, verse 8, Shema na Yoshua Kohen Gadol. Listen, therefore, or please listen, please pay attention, Yoshua Kohen Gadol, Yeshua, the high priest, Ata u'ra'echa hayoshvim lefanecha, you and your colleagues, your friends who are sitting before you, Ki anshe mofet hema, because they are exceptional people, or they are exemplary people. Anshe mofet, or maybe it would be more in modern Hebrew. So anshe mofet might be a wonder. They represent a sign or a wonder. Ki hineni mevi et avdi tzemach, because behold, I will bring my servant, my slave, tzemach. Okay, this is kind of a loaded phrase. Tzemach literally means a branch, but this means the descendant of David who will sit, or this is most likely referring to the descendant of David who will sit on the throne in the future. Okay, let's get a little translation and commentary. 8. Listen, pray, Joshua, high priest, and your companions sitting before you, for they are men who have had a portent that I'm about to bring, my servant branch. All right. See what that means. So men who have had a portent. So the literal sense is men of a portent, or we saw it in the Hebrew. Anshe mofet. Mofet is like a sign, a wondrous sign, a portent. But it is hard to see how Joshua's priestly colleagues could be the portent, as they're represented in most translations. The rendering here follows the Babylonian Talmud Sanhedrin 93a, which says, for whom a portent was performed. Perhaps they've witnessed Joshua's change from foul garments to fine raiment, which would be the portent. Okay? And then we get to my servant branch. The Hebrew term for branch, tzemach, is clear dynastic associations. There's a debate among interpreters as to whether this refers to an eschatological Davidic ruler or to Zerubbabel, but the latter seems more likely because the grand restoration appears to be imminent. Political considerations may have led Zechariah to suppress his name. So eschatological, this word here means end of days. So what Robert Alter is saying here is it may refer to an end of days ruler from the line of David, meaning this would be an end of days prophecy. Or what he's applying here is they thought the end of days was imminent and there would be a ruler from the descendants of David who would sit on the throne immediately. That, of course, did not happen. Or perhaps it's referring to Zerubbabel. So it's not clear, right? But once again, in the Hebrew, let's just read this somewhat complicated verse again. Shimana Yoshua Kohen Hagadol. So please listen, Yoshua, the high priest. You and your friends or companions, who are sitting before you, or seated before you, because they are people who have a vision of the future, a portent. Because behold, I will bring my servant Tzemach. Let's get a little bit of other interpretation as to what this might mean. So Tzemach, okay, so they translate it as a branch, a bud, that which grew. Branch growth heads plants. In modern Hebrew, Tzemach is a plant. Okay, from Tzemach, a sprout, either literal or figurative. Branch, bud, that which grew upon springing up. Okay. So let's just read this. Show what this is, the range of meaning and imagery, whatever. So Tzemach spans the literal sphere of vegetation and the prophetic sphere of covenant hope. In everyday speech, it denotes any natural sprouting, bud, or fresh growth. In prophetic texts, it becomes a title, the branch, for the promised Davidic ruler through whom the Lord will renew his people and his land. Okay, so this is kind of important, I guess. So this Tzemach, let's look a little bit more into this Tzemach. So 4 key passages use Tzemach as a proper title for the coming king. Isaiah 4:2. On that day, the branch of Yahweh will be beautiful and glorious. The image links moral beauty with the restored land. Jeremiah 23:5. I will raise up to David a righteous branch. Will minister justice and righteousness in the land. The title unites royal lineage, righteousness, and effective rule. Our verse here, and we'll get to Zechariah chapter 6 eventually. So let's look very briefly at Isaiah 4:2. And we'll go over to the Hebrew. I love the split view. Oops. How do I go back? Cool. Get over to Hebrew. Try this again. Oh, no. Bear with me here for 1 second. Okay. I guess maybe the split view doesn't always work. I haven't figured out how to use it yet. Oh, so you can make it large or small. That's cool too. All right, what happens if I do that? Give me 1 second here. Okay, this gets to the Hebrew. I want the whole verse in Hebrew. Oh my. All right, let's stop this. Let's stop the split view. And we'll do this. So let's go directly to Isaiah. Isaiah 4. Now we can go to the Hebrew. Okay, so this is Isaiah chapter 4. Start from verse 1 just to get the context. "V'chziku shevet nashim ba'ish echad b'yom hahu lemor lachmenu nachal simlatenu nilbash rak karei shimcha alenu sof cherpatenu." So 7 women will take hold of one man in that day. Lemor, saying, and this is actually a prophecy of the kind of the end of this destruction prophecy, but at any rate, so these 7 women will take hold of one man and say, "Lachmenu nachal, simlatenu nilbash." We'll provide our own bread and our own clothes. In other words, they'll say to the man, "You don't have to provide for us. Rak yikareh shimcha alenu." Just let your name be called upon us. In other words, marry us, take us as wives. Sof cherpatenu, and take away our disgrace. Bayom hahu yi'et tzemach Yahweh tzvi u'lekavod. So in that day, the shoot, the branch of Yahweh, will be as a tzvi u'lekavod, will be for beauty and for honor. Upriya aretz, and the fruit of the land, legaon, will be for pride, u'litiferet, and for majesty, u'lefleitat Yisrael, the fleitat Yisrael, for those who escape, or for the escapees among Israel. So this is actually more of a destruction prophecy. But at any rate, here appears Tzemach Yahweh, the branch of Yahweh. Okay, let's go back to Zechariah chapter 3. So again, this Tzemach seems to be perhaps an end of days, or relating to an end of days ruler from the Davidic line over Israel, but not necessarily so. Verse 9. Break it into 2 verselets. The term is verselets, but I like the word verselets better. Hine ha'evan asher natati lefnecha lifnei Yoshua al even echad shiva einayim. Behold, the stone that I've placed before Yoshua, this Kohen Gadol, al even echad shiva einayim. On this one stone is 7 eyes. Okay, what does that mean? Here's the 7 eyes. So the only thing we get is a reference from Robert Alter chapter 4. So let's just leave it for that until we get to eventually chapter 4. So hine mifpateach pituha ne'um Yahweh. So behold, I will inscribe its inscription, declares Yahweh of hosts. Umashti etavon haaretz, and I will cause to go away the iniquity of the land, of that land in one day. All right, let's get a little interpretation there. So wipe away. The verbal stem mush indicates removal, but it does not appear elsewhere in this conjugation as a transitive verb. The Hebrew mashti could be a mistake from mahiti, the verb usually employed for the expunging of guilt. So Robert Alter is saying there might be a scribal error there. Here. And that this might have supposed to have been mahiti instead of mashti. Okay. At any rate, remove, right? I'm about to engrave its engraving in the Lord of armies, and I said the Lord of armies, and I will wipe away the guilt of this land on a single day. And then we have Biyomahu, Ne'um Yahweh. So on the day declares Yahweh Tzivaot of hosts. What does it mean, Lord of hosts, by the way? Anybody? In Hebrew, it's Yahweh Tzivot. What does it mean, Lord of Hosts? Anybody want to say? What do you think that means, Lord of Hosts? We see it all the time, so much that we take it for granted, right? We don't even ask what it really means. Okay, well, the Lord of Hosts refers to the idea that Yahweh is surrounded by the host of angels. We've seen many images of this in many different places. For instance, the beginning of the book of Job. Right, all of the heavenly hosts, all of the angels come and surround him. It's like a king that's surrounded by his court, by his entourage. So that's what it refers to. It shows the greatness of Yahweh as a king. So he's not there alone. He's surrounded by an entourage of angels. How many? Thousands, millions, 10 million, billions, who knows? Different visions imply different things. That's whenever you see Lord of Hosts, that's what it means. Wherever Yahweh goes, his heavenly entourage goes with him. He's a king, right? In the heavenly realm, he doesn't have a physical body. So in this heavenly realm, he has other heavenly, non-corporal, corporal? I guess that's the right word. Non-corporal entities that surround him, that protect him, honor him. He doesn't need protection, but that's the way king, right? Is surrounded by his entourage. So Yahweh, who has an entourage, maybe would be, or the Yahweh who's always surrounded by his entourage. Okay, so on that day, on what day? When I remove the iniquity of the land on that single day, each man will call to his fellow man. אהלן רחל, מה שלומך? הכל בסדר, כן, היה אזעקה, אבל הכל בסדר. כן, פתחתי שם את הדלת ונכנסתי. מצוין, אז אנחנו מוגנים. מה זה? כן? מתי? בבוקר לא הייתי במטבח היום. לא, הלכתי אצל החברים, אצל הקהילה. טוב, אז אני אוכל את זה הערב. תודה. שבת שלום. ביום ההוא נאום יחווה צבאות תקראו איש לרעהו אל תחת גפן ואל תחת תאנה. So on the day, declares Yahweh of hosts, who's surrounded by his entourage, right? תקראו איש לרעהו אל תחת גפן ואל תחת תאנה. Each person will call to another person to sit under his vine, his grapevine. A geffen is a grapevine, and under his fig tree. So this is imagery, the idea of that each person under his vine and under his fig tree, this is imagery of a time of peace and prosperity in Israel, that everyone sits peacefully in the land. Each person has his own parcel of land and sits at peace under his vine and under his fig tree. This imagery of the vine and the fig tree occurs a bunch of times throughout the Tanakh. In fact, let's ask Rabbi AI to get a list of it. Where in the Old Testament does the phrase vine and fig tree appear? Let's see how good Rabbi AI is. So we saw in Zechariah 3:10. So Deuteronomy 8:8, that's the list of, that's not exactly there. Just look very quickly. No, that doesn't mention vine and fig tree. It mentions a whole bunch of, that's Deuteronomy 8:8, so we won't even go there, but let's take one example. So let's take Micah 4:4. Okay, so we go to Micah. Okay, so this is the end of days prophecy. Very explicit here. And it shall be at the end of days. That's literally what that means. One second here. So so shall be the mountain of the house of Yahweh, established at the head of all of the mountains. Okay, well, we won't go through all the prophecy, but in that end of days prophecy, we see in verse 4, this is Micah chapter 4, verse 4, and each person shall sit under his vine and under his fig tree, and there will be no one to frighten them. Because the mouth of Yahweh, who is surrounded by his entourage, has spoken. Okay. And we have also, let's take one other example. How about 2 Kings 18:31? Right, so the Sancherib. Uh, 31. So we won't get into the whole historical reference here, but Sancherib has come to attack Yerushalayim, laid siege around Yerushalayim, and his head of the army, Rav Shakeh, is now trying to convince the Jerusalemites to basically to give up, to surrender. But Hezekiah, he holds out. In the end, the Assyrians disappear. They never conquered Jerusalem, and the Assyrians return home. And this is actually attested to in an Assyrian archaeological find. I think it's I can't remember which one it is. I'll have to look it up, but it doesn't matter. Al tishma'u el Chizkiyahu. So do not listen to Chizkiyahu. So this is now the head of the Assyrian army, the head of Sennacherib's army, trying to convince the Jerusalemites to surrender. So Al tishma'u el Chizkiyahu. Don't listen to your king Hezekiah. Kiko amar melech Ashur. Because so says the king of Assyria. Asuiti bracha. Make with me a blessing. In other words, make with me a peace treaty. But come out to me, surrender to me. And each person shall eat under his vine and under his fig tree. And each person shall drink water from his own cistern, from his own well. Okay, so there's an attempt by Rav Shakeh, the head of the army of Sancherib, the Assyrian king Sancherib, to try to convince the Israelites to ignore Chizkiyahu, who's resisting. He built a wall. You can even see it. It's believed to be in the old city of Jerusalem. If you ever go to the old city of Jerusalem, you can see something called Hezekiah's Wall, or the Broad Wall. It's in the Jewish quarter, right off the main square of the old city of Jerusalem. And this is believed, of course, there's always disagreements in biblical archaeology, like there isn't any academic topic, but traditionally it's believed to be a wall that Hezekiah built to protect Jerusalem against Sancherib, against the invasion by Sancherib. There was also the tunnel, Hezekiah's tunnel, which I also highly recommend visiting. That's in the city of David. You go visit Hezekiah's tunnel, which is the tunnel that he built to allow water to come in inside the city of Jerusalem, because the main water supply for the city of Jerusalem was on the east side of the Jerusalem is basically a ridge. So the east side of the ridge, down that side of the ridge, down into the Kidron Valley, was called the Gihon Spring. And again, Hezekiah built this tunnel to be able to take the water from the Gihon Spring and lead it inside the city in preparation for the expected attack again from Sancheriv. Anyway, a lot of history going on there. But the point is that Hezekiah is making preparations to resist Sancheriv, and in the end, of course, Sancheriv is resisted. And but Rav Shakeh, the head of the army of Sancheriv, is trying to convince the Jews to give up, the Israelites to give up, to surrender, by saying that if they surrender and make a treaty with me, then they'll have the good life. Each person shall be able to eat under his vine and under his fig tree. Okay, so we see that this analogy or this metaphor or this phrase, under one's vine and under one's fig tree, is an indication of the good life, right? Of peace and prosperity. Okay, let's go on. That's it. We're done with Zechariah chapter 3. Should we go on to chapter 4? Let's see. I'm tempted to. I love Zechariah. It's such an interesting book. Or should we go? We should probably go to Leviticus, right? If we do Zechariah 4, we'll never get to Leviticus. Let's see. I think we're going to stop here. Let's get a little bit more. So to come under the vine, come is applied in the translation for idiomatic coherence in English. Sitting under the vine and under the fig tree is a proverbial expression for a time of peace and prosperity. Only later would it take on an eschatological meaning, as in the mention of Jesus sitting under the fig tree in the first chapter of John's Gospel. Okay? Alrighty. Any questions, any comments? Any questions, any comments on Zechariah chapter 3? Let me just make a note where we got up to for next time. And we'll take a quick 5-minute break. And then we will go into Leviticus chapter 24. So let me put a little bit of music on. And we'll be back in about 5 minutes. Okay, welcome back. Welcome back. We'll continue the Torah study right now. Once again, you are. Okay, so once again, this is the World Alliance of Qara'im Shabbat Torah study. Let's make sure the internet seems to be working okay, and it does. Cool. And we're back. We are now going to dig in to Leviticus chapter 24. Let me just take this opportunity once again to briefly remind you that if you are not yet financially supporting the World Alliance of Qara'im, we strongly request and ask that you do. We're working on a bunch of projects right now, including setting up a community here in Israel, in the Golan Heights. We've already started having regular meetings. We already have a small community that's building up here in Israel, and we'd like to extend it. We want to set up a learning center, a school essentially, and we have a whole bunch of other projects that we're working on. So let me just post a link. 1 second to find it. So here's the link. This is how you can become a member of the World Alliance of Qara'im. And it gives you a lot of benefits as well. You'll get access to our WhatsApp group where you have other very dedicated Karaites, other members of the community. You can interact with them. You can ask them questions. You can discuss issues with them. It will give you more access directly to me. I've had to cut back on direct access to people who are not members of the community just because I just don't have the time to respond to all of the emails and questions that I get. So I'm focusing really a lot more on members of the community, and will allow us, as I said, to raise very important money for various projects that we're working on, including expanding our community here in Israel. As I said, setting up a school, a learning center, all of these kinds of things, which is what we want to do over the next couple of years. So please help us out by going to patreon.com/join/Karaite Insights. And there you can become part of the World Alliance of Qara'im. In addition, you're also invited, if you regularly give charity or tithe, as is common in some communities, to direct all or part of that money towards the World Alliance of Qara'im. Once again, these funds really help us work on these important projects that we're currently working on. So if you want to know how to do that, then you can look at the description for the study. It's all posted there, or you can contact me privately, and you can donate either in Israel or in the United States, or actually worldwide. So contact me and I can give you details about that, or you can look at the description. Okay, enough about that. We are now going to get back into the book of Leviticus. We're in Leviticus chapter 24. So last time we spoke about the lamps, and now we're going to speak about the showbread. So let us, I can get rid of this, that stay up. So again, let's just get a map of what we're talking about here. See if we can find a good one. Maybe that one. No. There we go. That works. One second here. Okay, you should all be able to see now. Okay, so this is the holy area, the Kodesh, and right over here is where we have the showbread. Okay, here's the menorah, here's the showbread, and you can see it's to the north. And over here is the altar of incense. So we're speaking about now the showbread. Okay, so let's dig in. We're in Leviticus chapter 24, verse 5. I think we started doing it last week, so this will be a little bit of review for the first verse or two, but we have with Pakachta Solet, with Afita, Shtem Asere Halot. So you shall take top quality flour, and you shall bake it into 12 loaves. Halot. Shne Asronim Ye'eh Chala Achad. 2/10 of an ephah. We spoke about this last week. An ephah is a volumetric measure, solid measure. So again, maybe equivalent to a cup of flour. I mean, that kind of measure, in other words. So it's a volumetric measure of a solid. Okay. So each challah shall be 2/10 of an ephah. And this will be baked into loaves. So we're talking about 12 loaves. 12 chalot. All right, let's see if we can get any commentary there. Nope, nothing so far. I'm sorry, I was looking at the wrong verse. We're in verse 5. It's 12 loaves. We read this last week, but let's read it again. This sanctified number, of course, reflects the number of the tribes of Israel, as does the number of stones in the breastplate of the high priest. The bread in question is the bread of display, or the bread of presence, in Hebrew lechem hapanim, or the showbread, laying out bread on the altar daily, or even several times a day, with the idea of symbolically feeding the deity, was a widespread practice in ancient Near Eastern religions. Jacob Milgram suggests that it was in order to distance this cherished cultic procedure from any notion of providing sustenance to God that this version of the law stipulates putting out fresh loaves only once a week. The inevitably stale bread could then be consumed by the priests, perhaps one of the less attractive of their sacerdotal prerequisites. So I remember going to a Hindu temple back in New York, in Queens, in Flushing, Queens, and you would see there they would have their idols set up. You'd walk into this hall, and it would be all around it would be these various different idols Vishnu and Brahma and all these, and there would be food set out before them. And then there was a little sign next to each of them that said, please do not touch the god. Idol worship is one freaky thing, let me tell you. If you ever want to see it in action, go to the nearest Hindu temple where you live, and it will be it's worth the trip, believe me. It's very interesting to see it up close and personal. Okay. So let's go on. Oh, I'm not sharing the screen. My bad. Yeah, check back in. All right. So, Samtotam, with Samtotam, Shtaim Ma'arachot, Shish Hama'arechet, Al Shulchan at Or Bifnei Yahweh. So you shall place them in 2 columns or 2 rows. It's 2 columns. Shish Hama'arachet, 6 loaves, 6 per column. Al Shulchan, on the table. Al Shulchan Tahor, on the pure table of Yahweh. So what does it mean, the pure table? It means the table that's made of pure gold. So, and let's go back to, maybe we'll get a little little Rabbi AI action. Okay, so the showbread, also spelled shewbread, refers to 12 loaves of consecrated unleavened bread that were placed on a golden table in the holy place of the tabernacle and later in the temple of Jerusalem. So known in Hebrew as the lechem apanim, bread of the presence. It was kept constantly before God. Quantity and arrangement. 12 loaves representing the 12 tribes of Israel were arranged in 2 rows of 6. The replacement, fresh bread was placed on the table every Shabbat. And the old bread was consumed by the priests. Okay. What was the table made out of? Sorry, I think it was a technical error. Are we back? Guys, can you let me know if we're back? Can you hear me and see me? Somebody let me know. Just type in a Y for yes to let me know if you can hear me and see me. I'm assuming that's the case. And if that happens, if something is wrong, please, I know a lot of you have my WhatsApp number. Just text me on WhatsApp. That's the best way. All right, I'm going to assume we're back. Let me share the screen again. So we were asking about what is the table of the showbread made out of. So according to the biblical descriptions in Exodus 25 and Exodus 37, the table of showbread was made of acacia wood. It was overlaid with pure gold. So then I asked the question, basically all of the furniture of the tabernacle, later the temple, the Yahweh, the house of Yahweh, was made with acacia wood overlaid with either gold or, in the case of the altar in the courtyard, with bronze. But there are two items, only two items of the major pieces of furniture that are made with pure gold, meaning it's a block of gold. They're made out of a block of gold. Does anybody know what those two items are? Two very specific items. Going once, going twice. Anybody? So number one item is, can you send what, Surya? I'm not sure what you're talking about. At any rate, so the two items that are made of pure gold and don't have acacia wood overlaid with gold are the ark cover, the cover of the ark in the Holy of Holies, not the ark itself, not the Ark of the Covenant, but the cover of the Ark of the Covenant. That's where the two cherubim, it's beaten out of a single block of gold into the two cherubim. And remember, between those two cherubim is where the glory of Yahweh resides. And the other one is the menorah. The menorah is in the holy area. So again, if we bring up this, oh, I see everything closed now. So again, right? So this is a menorah. It's made out of pure gold, and the ark cover here, just the cover, is also made out of pure gold. Okay, so going back to Leviticus chapter 24. We were working with Rabbi AI, the only rabbi I trust. So they don't trust the regular rabbis. So, okay. So gold molding, it featured decorative gold moldings or crown around the top rim. Hold on one second. Let's see if my cat wants to come in. Lavi, come in. Come here, lady. Go to your chair. Go to your chair. Go to your chair. Go. All right. Gold rings. So 4 gold rings were attached to the 4 corners of its legs to hold carrying poles. The poles themselves were also made of acacia wood and overlaid with gold. And the utensils, accompanying dishes, pans, pitchers, and bowls, were made of pure gold. Right. So that's not furniture, so I didn't include that in my question. But I'm talking about the major pieces of furniture. There were 2 that were made out of pure gold: the menorah and the kaporet, the ark cover. Okay. So back to Leviticus chapter 24. Verse 7. So you shall place upon each column or each row livona zakah. Livona is frankincense. Zakah is clear or pure frankincense. I think we spoke about this last week. Okay. You can again ask, what is frankincense? I'm getting used to this AI stuff. I was very skeptical at first, but it does have its value here and there, although I don't like the word AI. I don't think it's accurate. Okay, so frankincense, also known as olibanum, is a fragrant aromatic gum resin obtained from the trees of the genus Boswellia. Historically and spiritually, it's the most famous as one of 3 gifts alongside golden myrrh, blah, blah, blah. That's from the New Testament. So I guess this is a picture here. Okay, of frankincense tree. So the resin is produced primarily in the dry mountainous regions of India, Africa, and the Arabian Peninsula, Oman, Yemen, Somalia, and Ethiopia. The tree comes from scraggly but hardy boswellia trees, which can sometimes grow directly out of solid rock. The tapping process. Harvesters. Oh my God, we should just ask about what this appear. Harvesters make small incisions or taps in the tree's bark using a specialized knife. Tears of milky white sap oozes from these cuts and hardens upon exposure to air into translucent golden tears or lumps. Grading. Trees are typically tapped 2 or 3 times a year. The final taps usually produce the highest quality and most aromatic resin. Biblical and ritual significance. In the Bible, frankincense is a recurring symbol of prayer, worship, and divinity. Sacred incense, it was a key ingredient in the holy incense burden in the tabernacle and temple. Symbolism, its rising smoke was seen as a physical metaphor for the prayers of the faithful ascending to God. We don't have to go into the magi. Showbread. So pure frankincense was also placed on the rows of the bread of the presence. Showbread is a memorial offering. Okay, so once again, this is frankincense right there. We see that's the tree, that's the sap coming out of the tree. Right, a milky white sap oozes from these cuts and hardens upon exposure to air into translucent golden tears or lumps. That's what that is. Okay, that's the frankincense. Okay, so frankincense is placed on each one of the rows. In verse 8, Bayom Shabbat, Ya'archenu lifnei Yahweh tamid. So on each and every Shabbat, see again we have repetition. We know that repetition means, I said every study, I repeat it every study. Repetition. Whoa. Excuse me. What are you doing? What are you doing? No. No. Get back up there. Get back to your chair, or you're going to have to go out. You're going crazy. Lavi, behave. So, Bayom Shabbat, right? So that literally means on the day of the Shabbat, but repetition means emphasis. So each and every Shabbat might be a good way to translate this. Okay, so on each and every Shabbat, Yorchenu lifnei Yahweh, it is to be arranged, or it is to be set up before Yahweh, tamid, always. Right, every Shabbat. Me'et b'nei Israel, brit olam, from the children of Israel, or by the children of Israel. I'm going to let the cat out. He's driving me a little bit crazy here. Go out. Lavi, go. Let's go. Get out of here. Okay, so Me'et b'nei Israel, brit olam. So it's an eternal covenant from the children of Israel, or with the children of Israel, one could say. Let's get a little commentary. So, and you shall place them in 2 rows, 6 to a row, on the pure gold table before the Lord. You shall place clear frankincense together with the row, and it shall become a token offering for the bread, a fire offering to the Lord. Did I skip that verse? Yes, I did. Skip part of it. So let's go back there. So you shall place pure or clear frankincense upon each row. And it shall be for the bread. The frankincense shall be for the bread la'askara, a memorial. Yahweh, a fire offering to Yahweh. So I guess that would imply that the frankincense is burnt, right? It's like incense. It's burnt like incense. Okay. So Sabbath day after Sabbath day, they shall be laid out before Yahweh perpetually on behalf of the Israelites in everlasting covenant. And then let's do the last verse, and then we can go back and do all of the commentary. Vaitan Aaron ulevanav, and it shall be the possession of Aaron and his sons, in other words, to the Kohanim. Luhu b'makom kadosh, and it shall be eaten in a holy place. Ki kadosh kadoshim hu, meaning holy place. That would imply within the province of the tent of meeting, within the courtyard, somewhere within the courtyard of the tent of meeting. Ki kodesh kadoshim hu, because it is holy of holies. It is very holy. Lo, for him, meaning for Aaron, for the Kohanim, me'ishe Yahweh, from among the fire offerings of Yahweh, chokolam. So we've mentioned the fire offerings before. Every other time, I can't think of any other instance where a fire offering is a very specific thing. A fire offering is an offering that is thrown on the altar of sacrifice. That's very specifically what a fire offering it is, with one exception. This frankincense that is burnt on the showbread table, right? Once again, where's the showbread table? Let's take a look. Right here, there's a showbread table. It's in the holy area. So this is the holy area or the holy place. This is the Holy of Holies. This whole thing is the tent of meeting. Okay. Later, the Beit Yahweh, later the house of Yahweh. When Solomon turns it from a tent to a house, makes it permanent. And when you walk towards the Holy of Holies, you're walking from east to west. And so it's on the north side of the holy area, of the holy place. Okay, that's where it is. Here's the menorah. Here's the incense altar. This is the Ark of the Covenant with the cover over at the top of it. Out here, this is the this is the sacrificial altar, and this is the kior, the laver, later the yam. Solomon makes this big, it's called the sea, that is later dispossessed by Nebuchadnezzar, by the Babylonians, carried off. Okay, at any rate, what did I want to say? Oh, Suriel, the answer to that is yes. Contact me privately, please, okay? Sorry, the answer is yes. Contact me privately. Actually, I can just, I can give you the Zelle information. I actually posted on, one second. Here. You know what? I don't want to talk about it on Shabbat. Let's talk about it after Shabbat. Just contact me privately or I'll send it to you. Okay? Even though it's past Shabbat here, it's not past Shabbat where you are. Okay. Right. So, where were we? Right. We were talking about the fire offerings of Yahweh. So we've seen this phrase, fire offerings of Yahweh, Ishet Yahweh. It's a very specific thing. It means a very specific thing. And that is an offering that's thrown onto the altar of sacrifice, with one exception. This is the only exception we've come across, at least so far, and I can't think of any others, where it's a fire offering, but it's not on the altar of sacrifice. In other words, it's not on this altar out here. And yet it's called a fire offering because the frankincense is burnt. It's burnt like incense. Okay. There are other types of offering. For instance, we saw in Leviticus chapter 23 the omer atnufa. That's a wave or an elevation offering. It's not a fire offering. Okay? It's not burnt. It's waved up and down or elevated. Okay. So fire offering is a very specific thing. Every other time it means something that's thrown onto the altar of sacrifice. Here it means something that's burned. Right. The incense in this case. The frankincense in this case, okay? So, yeah, so that's it. Let's get a little translation and commentary. So, verse 9, and it shall be Aaron's and his sons, and they shall eat it in a holy place, for it is holy of holies, for him from the Lord's fire offerings and everlasting statute. So, clear frankincense. Adjective used zach. Right, and we saw this in verse 1. Shemen Zayit Zach, talking about the lighting oil, right? Zach katit. talking about the lighting oil for the menorah. Where's the menorah? The menorah is here on the south side of the holy area. Okay, we said that zach means clear, first pressed. Okay, and katit means crushed, so not pressed, but perhaps crushed instead of pressed. But it basically means the finest, clearest olive oil. And here we have again that same word for the livona, the frankincense. Livona zakah. Livona zakah. Here we have shemen zayit zach. Zach. Here zakah. Why zakah instead of zach? Because olive oil, the word shemen zayit, which means oil of olive, is masculine. The word shemen is masculine, so it's shemen zach, but it's the same word, just in the feminine form. So here it is livona, not zach, but livona zakah. Okay, clear frankincense. Alrighty. So a token offering for the bread, a fire offering. Since the bread itself is not consumed on the altar, but is left untouched until the following Shabbat, when it may be given to the priests, the frankincense set alongside the bread is burned as a token offering, or memorial offering would be maybe the more traditional translation. Okay, Shabbat day after Shabbat day. The literal contour of the Hebrew idiom is on the Shabbat day, on the Shabbat day. We spoke about that. And that's it. Now we get to the blasphemer. Should we do that today? Sure. Sure, let's do it. We'll go through it quickly. So now this is narrative, right? We have someone who blasphemes the name of God. And let's see what happens to him. Any questions, any comments so far? Any questions, any comments so far? So let's go on. We're going to talk about the blasphemer. So this is really one of the few narrative stories in Leviticus. We did have some other narrative stories in Leviticus. We had in, I believe it's Leviticus 9. We had the tragic story. No, not 9. 10? Yeah. Of Nadav and Avihu, the first and second sons of Aaron, who were put to death when they brought incense that was not part of the laws that Yahweh had set down, for their own unlicensed incense. And other than that, I can't think of any other narrative we have in the book of Leviticus. It's a very technical and law-heavy kind of book, right? But here we do have some more narrative. So let's go through this. This is the blasphemer. Vayetze ben isha Yisraelit v'hu ben ish Mitzri b'toch b'nei Yisrael. So this is very interesting. This is one of the proofs of Leviticus chapter 24:10 for patrilineal descent in Israel. This whole verse. وَيُنَتْسُ بَمَحَنَeh ben ha-Yisraelit wa-ish ha-Yisraeli. Okay, let me translate it. And then I'll throw the question out to the audience, why is this proof of patrilineal descent? So the son of an Israelite woman and an Egyptian man, so it's an Egyptian man, it's the son of it's a person whose father was an Egyptian and whose mother was an Israelite, went out, b'toch b'nei Israel, went out among the children of Israel, وَيَنَتْسُ b'machaneh ben ha-Yisraelit or ish ha-Yisraeli, and in the camp, and so a fight developed between the son of the Israelite woman and an Israelite, another Israelite, literally an Israelite man. So how is this proof of patrilineal descent? Anybody? And I'm writing a book on patrilineal descent, which I hope will be ready soon. How is this proof of patrilineal descent? This is a proof verse that I use all the time when rabbinical Jews, when rabbinites try to tell me that the Torah doesn't, believes in matrilineal descent as the rabbis do in this day and age, and for already about close to 2,000 years. Okay, so we see, if you look at the English, let's look at the English, it'll become clearer. Okay, so who's the person? The son of an Israelite mother and an Egyptian father. Okay, so that's this person who went out. He's an Israelite mother and he's an Egyptian father. So he went out among the Israelites. So this already implies, this is one of the proofs in this verse, but there's an even clearer one. Or there are two proofs really. So he's not called an Israelite. It's pointed out specifically that has an Israelite mother, but doesn't have an Egyptian father. If he just had if he had an Israelite father, then it wouldn't say that, it wouldn't point out that that he an Israelite father and an Egyptian mother, because then it would just be an Israelite. Okay, so it's clear that he's saying he's not an Israelite. And how do we know this? A fight broke out in the camp between him and an Israelite. So he's not an Israelite. Okay, he went out among the Israelites and he got into a fight with an Israelite. So all of this language here implies that he's not an Israelite, yet he has an Israelite mother. So according to the rabbis, he's an Israelite, he's a Jew. But according to the Tanakh, he's not, because he's an Egyptian father. So once again, the rabbis go by the mother. If your mother's Jewish, you're Jewish, according to the rabbis. But the Torah, the Tanakh, goes by the father. If your father is Jewish, then you're Jewish. If your father is Israelite, then you're Israelite. And we see very clearly here that even though he has an Israelite mother, he's not considered an Israelite. He went out among the Israelites, and a fight broke out in the camp between him and an Israelite, implying twice that he himself is not an Israelite. And we even see this further here, the son of the Israelite woman. So again, he's not called an Israelite. He's called the son of the Israelite woman. Let's go back to the Hebrew. So, Yaakov literally means to point out or to state by name, but it's a euphemism for cursing. So basically, he cursed God by using the name. He cursed the name, the explicit name, I won't say it, but he cursed God, basically using the real name. He cursed God by his true name. Not good. Okay. How's the English translate it? The son of the Israelite woman blasphemed the name with a curse. I don't like that translation. Let's look at Robert Alter's translation. Okay. Invoked the name, vilifying it. Good. That's a good translation, as often Robert Alter is. Okay, invoked. That's a perfect translation. Okay, he mentioned by name. Mentioned. He named the name, cursing it, vilifying it. Okay. Waikalel. Well, here's cursing. He mentioned. Sorry, let me state this again. Waikov ben Isha Yisraelit et Hashem wa ikalel. So he pointed out or used the explicit name of God of the name and cursed it. Okay. Let's get a little interpretation here. Brawled. So the verb violent altercation is the same one used for two Hebrew men whom the young Moses rebukes in Exodus chapter 2. That's what caused them ultimately to have to flee to Midian. Okay, Yinatsu. So we don't have to look that up. But if you remember how Moses ends up in Midian, he sees an Egyptian beating an Israelite, and he kills the Egyptian. And the next day, he sees two Israelites arguing or fighting, brawling, as Robert Alter translates it. And then he tries to stop it. And one of them says, "Are you going to kill me like you killed that Egyptian yesterday?" Then Moses knew that the word was out and found out that Pharaoh was looking to kill him because he killed this Egyptian. And Moses fled to Midian, where he met his wife Zipporah eventually. Okay. Or quite quickly, actually. Okay. It is perhaps this verbal trigger that led Rashi to claim, Rashi, the worst Torah commentator ever in the history of Torah commentators, Ibn Ezra being one of the best. Rather fancifully, that the blasphemer in this episode was the son of the Egyptian taskmaker who Moses killed on the day. Okay, please. This is why I can't stand Rashi. What nonsense. It's so stupid. And not only is it stupid, it makes Jews think in this weird, mystical, bizarre way. Oh, God. I'm going to read it again so you can see what a horrible Torah commentator this Rashi is. The worst in the world. I don't know if I mentioned this before, but when I was growing up, my grandfather, my mother's father, who was a very interesting character, he did not live a religious life, but he was very, very knowledgeable in the religious sources, in the Jewish sources. So he was an expert in the Talmud. He was an expert in Rashi. At any rate, when I was growing up, my grandfather and my grandmother, my mother's parents, had two cats, and their names were Rashi and Rambam. So I grew up. I didn't know Rashi and Rambam were rabbis from the Middle Ages. I just thought they were cats. And then years later, when I was at Hebrew school, when I was maybe, I don't know, 6, 7 years old or something like that, and the rabbi started talking about Rashi and Rambam, I kept on wondering why is the rabbi talking about my grandparents' cats? I didn't understand it. At any rate, I think my grandparents' cat Rashi was smarter than this Rashi, who is without a doubt the worst Torah commentator in the history of Judaism, the history of our people. What is a fire offering? A fire offering is any offering that's thrown on the altar of sacrifice. That's thrown on this altar. Sorry. Oops. Okay, here's the altar of sacrifice. So it's thrown on that altar of sacrifice and thereby burnt up. That's a fire offering. Any offering where part of it is thrown onto that altar of sacrifice is known as an ishet, from the word esh, which means fire. So an ishet is a fire offering. Okay. So getting back to Robert Alter. At any rate, enough about Rashi. You can see what a ridiculous comment that is. So invoke the name, vilifying the name in an interesting biblical anticipation of later pious usage in Hebrew, is an ellipsis for the name of, I'm not even going to say it in this context because this person cursed it, but you can see it on the screen. One suspects that the writer avoided using the complete phrase because the idea of actually invoking and vilifying God's holy name was so abhorrent to him. The object, right? So it doesn't say what he actually said. It doesn't even say, if you notice in this verse, and Robert also is making a very good point, okay? It doesn't even say the explicit name. Okay, and this whole story actually doesn't say the explicit name. Well, it does later on, but in the actual event, it doesn't mention the name. It says he just mentioned, or he pointed, or he used explicitly the name and cursed it. Okay, it doesn't say the actual name here, and it doesn't say what the actual sentence of his curse was. It doesn't say what he actually said. The object of vilifying it, the name is merely implied, though it might seem that the brawler is verbally abusing his adversary, supercharging the abusive language by introducing God's sacrosanct name. Verse 15 clearly makes his God the grammatical object of vilify. We'll get to that soon. That's verse 15. And this direct verbal assault on the name, I'm not going to say it here, is of course a graver transgression. Okay. So what did they do? This guy who is not an Israelite, who is the son of an Israelite woman and an Egyptian man. Okay. Yavioto el Moshe, they brought him to Moses. Right? Moses is the chief justice. He's the one when you have a case, as we saw in Exodus chapter 19, 17, 19, 18, I believe. Exodus chapter 18, don't quote me, it might be 17, 18, or 19, I think it's 18. Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, comes and suggests that Moses act as the chief justice, that a hierarchy of judges be set up, and if the lower judges can't solve a case, then it'd be brought to Moses. Moses takes on the hardest cases, just like the Supreme Court in the United States takes on the hardest cases, right? The most significant and the most difficult cases. If it can't get solved by the lower courts, then eventually it makes its way up to the higher courts and to the Supreme Court. So they brought him to Moses. Mo Shilomit bat Divri Lematedan. So his mother's name, more proof that, well, we'll talk about it in a second. V'shemi Mo, so his mother's name was Shulamit, bat Divri, so that was her name, Shulamit, the daughter of Divri, Lematedan, from the tribe of Dan. Okay, so it doesn't even point out his father's name here. Right? We know in the Torah that always it's the father's name that's pointed out. We know very little about the names of the mothers of many of the people in the Torah. Or if we know the names of their mothers, we don't know the names of their grandmothers, their maternal grandmothers. We don't know the names of their mothers' mothers in general. Rarely, I've ever. I'm sure there must be some case somewhere that I can't think of offhand. But here, instead of pointing out the father's name, it points out the mother's name. Isn't that strange? That shows us once again that what's important is the mother was an Israelite. The father, who was an Egyptian, is not even relevant because he's not an Israelite. He's not part of the lineage of Israel. And what this is pointing out is his mother. There are very few cases where the mother is used. Another example I think that I pointed out recently is Yoav ben Tzeruiah. So Yoav is David's nephew. Yoav is the head of David's army, and he's David's nephew. But instead of calling Yoav by the name of his father, Yoav is always called Yoav ben Tzeruiah. Tzeruiah is the name of his mother, and the reason that his mother's name is used is because she's David's sister. So it's relevant. What's relevant there is his mother, not his father. Okay, Yoav is the one who conquers Jerusalem by having his people climb up the shaft into the city, the water shaft into the city, which may have been excavated. It's something called Warren Shaft if you go visit the city of David, which some people believe might have been the shaft that Yoav crawled into to take over the city of Jerusalem. At any rate, neither here nor there. But once again, this is proof of patrilineal, that the father is important, because always it mentions the father, but doesn't even mention the father here because the father is not even Israelite. The father is Egyptian. Okay? So it departs from that convention, showing something is different here. So they put him, basically they put him in jail. Okay? They put him under guard. In order that Yahweh can explain to them what to do. So Moses doesn't even know. He goes to Yahweh. That's the way it's supposed to work. That's the way the hierarchy works. If Moses can't solve it himself, then he goes to the true judge, the judge over all of the universe, Yahweh himself. So now Yahweh is actually adjudicating this case. This is why it's so important that, and what we saw in ancient times, is that the top judge, the chief justice of Israel, is a prophet, because that chief justice has to have contact with Yahweh. Another reason that the rabbis don't have any true authority, because they had no contact with Yahweh. There was no prophet at the top of their hierarchy. So they were able to make everything up because God couldn't put them in place. God had disappeared. We see in Ezekiel chapter approximately 10 how the glory of God leaves the temple and flies off to the east because he couldn't stand anymore seeing what the Israelites and the leaders, the elders of the Israelites were doing. It's about chapter 10, I think it's chapter 8 actually, thereabouts, chapter 9 perhaps, doesn't matter. Okay, so here we see Moses, being a true chief justice, has direct contact with Yahweh. He's a prophet. He can go ask Yahweh. That's why most of the judges, perhaps all of the judges in the book of Judges and in the book of Joshua was a prophet. The judges were prophets. Devorah was a prophetess. She's called Devorah HaNevi'ah, Devorah the prophetess. And the other judges were prophets, explicitly so, or implicitly in some cases. So this is what Yahweh says, and this is so important, right? Because this is where the rabbis sneak in and do whatever the heck they want, because they're not in contact with Yahweh, so they can make their own stuff up, and then they could say that Yahweh said it not through prophecy, but through being passed down through this fake so-called oral law. That's why they call it the oral law, because they want to connect it back to Moses, back to God. It's snake oil salesmanship. That's essentially what it is. Whenever you hear the rabbis say the rabbinical oral law, they're trying to sell you snake oil. They're trying to call it the oral law because they want to say that their strange interpretations of the Torah were passed down from Moses to Joshua to the elders and so on and so forth, all the way down to Rabbi Akiva. Okay? It's a lie. Anyway, I can go off on about that for an hour, but I won't. It is in this new book, and I won't say new book, this book that I revamped, which should be available up on for sale this week, and I'll post the link next week, called The Torah in the Marketplace of Ideas. I speak about it there. Verse 14, take this blasphemer, this cursor, outside of the camp, and let all those who have heard him rest their hands or place their hands on his head, and all of the congregation shall stone him to death. Okay, let's get a little commentary. And they brought him to Moses, and his mother's name was Shelomit, the daughter of Divri, of the tribe of Dan. And they left them under guard until it should be made clear to them by the word of the Lord. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, take out him who vilified beyond the camp, and all who heard shall lay their hands on his head, and all the community shall stone him. Okay, let's get a little commentary. Start here. Until it should be made clear to them by the word of the Lord. What is to be made clear is what should be done with the malefactor. By the word, literally by the mouth of the Lord, in the present context, obviously refers to an oracle, and God's speech to Moses in the following verses is the message of the oracle. In other words, what this is saying is that Moses went to Yahweh to get prophecy, to get a direct message from Yahweh what should be done in this case. Because even Moses, the chief justice, could not solve it on his own. He had to ask Yahweh what to do. Okay. 14. So God too suppresses the divine object of the verb of scurrilous speech. So that's an interesting point. So it says, Hotzeta Mikalel, take the cursor, but he doesn't say the one who cursed the name of and then mention his name. The name is not mentioned here, right? Even God himself, even Yahweh himself, won't say his name as the object of the cursing. That's a nice point. I like that point by Robert Alter. All who heard, that is, all who heard blasphemous utterance. So everyone who heard him curse the name of God are going to be the ones who rest their hands, place their hands on his head, shall lay their hands on his head. In the biblical idiom, blood guilt rests on the head of the perpetrator. The laying on of hands by the witnesses is the confirming of the guilt. Right, of course. Just as hands are laid on, for instance, the scapegoat that we saw in Leviticus chapter 16 that's sent off the cliff, right? The Kohen Gadol lays his hands on the scapegoat and transfers all the sin onto the scapegoat, and then that goat is sent off the cliff or sent out into the wilderness. So similar idea here. Okay. Verse 15. And now here are the laws. So that's the incident. The incident ends after verse 14. Starts in verse 10 and goes through verse 14. Try that again. Okay. And now we get general laws. Now we get the halakha, the laws for the future. So this is still Yahweh speaking. So he says, take the blasphemer out and stone him to death. And to the children of Israel speak, lemor, to say, ish ki yikalel Elohao, v'nasach chet'o. Any man, any person who curses his God, notice it doesn't use the name here of Yud Kei Vav Kei, who curses his God, right? Gets pissed off. I hate you, God, or, go to hell, blah, 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 but doesn't use the actual name, right? V'nasach chet'o. He shall bear his iniquity. He shall bear his sin. In other words, he's gonna have to deal with it one way or another. He's gonna have to apologize, or God's gonna punish him. God's gonna punish him. God's gonna take it out of his hide, bad karma, whatever. Okay, he'll have to bear his sin. But it's not a death penalty, because here it's not speaking about mentioning the name. He didn't curse the name. He just said, God. I'm not even gonna say it, but go to H-E double hockey sticks God, right? Not mentioning the actual name, the explicit name. He's just pissed off at God for whatever. We all get pissed off at God sometimes. In fact, I always say one of my quips, one of my proverbs is, anyone who doesn't doubt the existence of God at least once a day doesn't really believe in God, doesn't really believe that he exists. And anyone who doesn't hate God at least once a day doesn't really love him. You could think about that for a while. So we all get mad at God, but just as children get mad at their father, right? Or their mother. They don't like the decisions that mommy and daddy are making for them. They resent them. They may lash out at their mother or father, and they even curse out their mother and father. You know, when they're going through their teenage years or something like that, maybe later, maybe earlier. So it's understandable to get mad at God because you don't agree what he's doing in your life. You know, you think he's being mean to you, or he made the wrong decision for you. He's being too harsh on you, and lash out. But so if you do that, if you lash out somehow and curse God out, then you're going to have to deal with it. You and him are going to have to work something out, okay? Whether that means he's going to take it out of your hide, or you're going to come to your senses and apologize, and he's going to forgive you. The two of you guys have to work it out, you and God. Okay, but okay, shame, Yahweh mot yumat. But anyone who curses, who explicitly singles out the name, the explicit name of God, Yahweh. Here it says the actual name. Who singles out the name Yahweh, mot yumat, shall be put to death. Most certainly will be put to death. Must be put to death. Ragom yirgemubo, and here we have repetition. Mot yumat must certainly be put to death. Ragom yirgemubo. Okay, he must certainly be, or they must certainly stone him to death. Kol ha'edah, the entire congregation, entire witnesses, the true Jehovah's Witnesses. Kol ha'edah means the witnessing congregation, or the group of witnesses, meaning Israel. It means the people of Israel. The true Jehovah's Witnesses are the children of Israel. Aidah comes the word aid, which means a witness. We saw another version of it earlier. At any rate, ger ke'ezrach b'nakvo shem yumat. Whether it's a ger or whether it's an ezrach. So ger is someone who joins the nation of Israel permanently, and an ezrach is someone who is a native-born Israelite who can trace his father's back to Jacob. Okay, so whether it's a ger or ezrach, maybe you're going to think maybe the ger won't be held to the same standard because he's not born Israelite. We give him a little bit of a break. The ger usually is a protected class in Israel, but no, in this case, it's such a serious. This is where the ger and the ezrach, the sojourner or the convert, quote unquote, and the native-born Israelite are treated equally under the law. Okay, if they blaspheme the name, shall be put to death. Okay, and that's the case of the blasphemer. Let's get a little more commentary. So, verse 16. So the element of the idiom that sticks in the craw of this pious writer and vilifying it is merely implied. The act of lèse majesté, I don't even know what that means. I don't even know what that means. Should we look it up? Sometimes Robert Alter tries to be too much of an academic. Something great. Majesty is like great. The legal term for an offense of defamation committed against the dignity of a ruling head of state, traditionally a monarch or the state itself. Okay. It's like when I was in Morocco. I've been in Morocco 5 times. I've spent close to a year of my life total in Morocco. I love it. I love it there, and I have to go back and visit again soon. But my friends, I have a lot of friends in Morocco, all of them Muslim, believe it or not. And they always told me, you could see that in Morocco, you could pretty much say whatever you want. Moroccans are very free to speak as they wish, and there's very little consequences. If you speak out against the Prophet Muhammad, then there might be consequences. But the one thing, that for sure, But the other thing that they always told me is that if you're not allowed to speak out against the king of Morocco, you can get in trouble if you speak out loud against the king of Morocco. So that is les majest. Okay, so that's Robert Alter's fancy word. So the act of speaking out against God, cursing God basically, who is the very rationale for the existence of the community, is understood to be a threat to the community itself, and so all are to be involved in the execution, right? The entire community will stone the blasphemer to death. In any case, this formulation, which appears to hold the mere invoking of the name as a sin, led later on to a general ban against pronouncing the name Yahweh, except by the high priest on the Day of Atonement in the Holy of Holies. So that's later on the rabbis then banned the use of the name. And that's not implied at all in this verse. Right? They understood Nokev Shem Yahweh. Anyone who mentions the name of Yahweh shall be put to death. And this is what the rabbis believe to this day, that one of the greatest sins you can do is say the explicit name Yahweh, and that's punishable by death. And if you ever say the name in front of a rabbinical Jew, they'll go nuts, an observant rabbinical Jew. And actually, when I'm speaking to rabbinical Jews, I'll avoid it because it's such a taboo. It's crazy. But just the opposite it should be. We should be saying the name, praying to the name, talking to the name, mentioning the name. The name is supposed to be known among all of Israel and all of humanity. Okay. And that's that. And then we get to an eye for an eye. We'll continue that next time. Let's just make a note. So we're in Leviticus 24:17. So that brings us to the end of our study. And it's getting late here. It's 8:45 p.m. here in Israel. I'll just make one note for myself. Okay. Making a note here. 1 second. Okay, so that's it. We've come to the end of our study. I'll mention a couple of things while you guys are still here. So I put out the latest version of the Karaites, the World Alliance of Qara'im Passover Haggadah. And it really came out beautiful, I must say. See if I can find the link. Let me see for 1 second. I can do it this way. Give me 1 second. I know where I do it. Okay. I have a shorter version of it. Let's see. I'll just bit.com. Okay, hold on 1 second. /silver. Get done. Let's right, Haggadah? Yeah, that's it. Okay, so I'll post a link. So this is the latest version of the Haggadah. So it's bit.ly/Karaite-Haggadah. So this is what I did for this version. It's really beautiful, I have to say. It's something I've been working on for years and years and improving it over the years for about now 15 years. And this is a hardcover version with the highest quality print and tons of pictures that I took, tons of photographs that I took throughout the land of Israel with verses actually from the Torah, both in English and in Hebrew, and all kinds of Psalms and stuff like that to make your own Karaite Passover Haggadah. So this one is on the expensive side because it's hardcover and it's the highest quality print. Eventually, I'll put out, hopefully I'll get to it soon, a companion version so that, let's say, the head of the Seder can buy this and then can buy the companion version, which will be more like a booklet, maybe even black and white, for all of the rest of the members of the Seder. But if you want to go ahead and buy and get this in the meantime, it really is beautiful. I'm not exaggerating. Of course, it raises money for the World Alliance of Qara'im. As you guys know, I'm focusing a lot more on money issues for the World Alliance of Qara'im lately. I have to because I have so many projects that I want to work on here, and it's super important. But this is really something beautiful. I'm not exaggerating. I'm not just saying that. It's something I've been working on and improving each year for 15 years. So that's the link for that. As I said, I'm also finishing revamping the book that I did, the marketplace, the Torah in the Marketplace of Ideas, and I'll send the link for that probably next week. It should be ready to have the link for that. So you can take a look at that. And other than that, that's it. That's all I got for today. I hope you've enjoyed this study. Hope you learned a lot from it. And I wish you guys all a wonderful week and a Shabbat Shalom wherever you are in the world, or a Shavua Tov. Pray for us here in Israel. It's a little bit hairy here. Where I live in the north of the country, it hasn't been as bad as some other places in the country, but we do get sirens. As you saw at the beginning of the study, we had a siren. We do get sirens pretty much, I would say, just about daily at this point. Thank God nothing has actually landed in Katsunin, but I did mention I was out doing a hike outside of where I live, about 20 minutes away, and the fireball came down and missed me by about 1,000 feet. Thank God, not a scratch on my body, but I wasn't freaked out at the time because it all happened so quickly. I didn't have time to be scared. The whole thing happened in like 2 or 3 seconds max. I just zoop, and heard this big explosion. Looked over and saw this giant fireball about 1,000 feet away from me. But afterwards, I was like, wow, that could have really ended up very differently, and definitely made me rethink about doing hikes out in nature during the war, which actually I kind of really need to. So I might do it anyway. It's super important for me to be out in nature, especially during the war. It makes me relax and think, but not if fireballs are raining down. Anyway, thank God nothing happened. And that's it. That's all I got. So I'm wishing everybody a Shabbat Shalom and a Shavua Tov. Hope you guys have an amazing rest of your Shabbat, an amazing week. And B'ezrat Yahweh, with the help of Yahweh, we will see you guys again next week. Shabbat Shalom and Shavua Tov. We'll go out with music, as always.
犹太心灵深处，拥抱着一个渴望。我们的眼睛朝向东方，远远地眺望夕阳下。我们不会失去2000年的希望，在自己国度做个自由民族，住在西安的耶路撒冷，在自己国度做个自由民族，住在西安的耶路撒冷。犹太心灵深处，拥抱着一个渴望。我们的眼睛朝向东方，远远地眺望夕阳下。我们不会失去2000年的希望，在自己国度做个自由民族，住在西安的耶路撒冷，在自己国度做个自由民族，住在西安的耶路撒冷。我们不会失去2000年的希